And this week on the show, we have a special guest, Jonathan Harden, who works with us. Welcome, Jonathan, by the way.
Thank you very much. I am welcome.
Yeah, happy to have you here. Jonathan works with us in our Personality Life Path Mentorship Program. He works as one of our facilitators and guides in that program, and you're in town this weekend for one of the events that we were ending one of the programs with. And we thought, you know what, let's get you on the podcast. Let's bring you over and let's have some conversation about some things going on in your life. So just to start us out, what are your best fit type preferences?
ENFJ.
ENFJ. And just give us like a quick snapshot of your life. Like, how would you describe your life situation you find yourself in?
My quick snapshot.
If you could do that as quick as you could.
Right now, I'm here, and I'll share like how
Are you married?
How I know you guys.
Do you have children?
Absolutely, yes.
Do you?
I am married. I have children, 3 wonderful children, and I do talk to them about type.
Okay.
I have some thoughts on that, like how I introduced the kids to type. And I work as a hospice nurse. I've worked as a nurse for about 14 years. My wife and I run a summer camp. She operates as the camp nurse. I'm her assistant, and I kind of do like lifeguarding or ropes course or whatever is needed. And we live on an animal camp, so there's like 350 animals always around us and our kids. And we made all that decision. It's been a long time, but like we lived a very traditional life for a while, and then we had a couple things happen, and we decided we're just going to get an RV and just travel and see where the wind takes us. And we ended up living on a summer camp, like kind of like in a commune or a community, and it's allowed us to travel a little bit more, which is good for our family. Yeah. That's one of our values, is being able to explore the world. And I think like kind of like linking into you guys, I'd been listening to the podcast since 2014.
Wow.
And found, I want to share this because I think this is interesting. One day my wife and I got into an argument, and it was mostly about me dragging her into social situations and expecting her to operate at the same level of intensity that I do.
What specific type preferences?
INTP. So yeah, ENFJ, married an INTP. And you can, if you know anything about type, you're clearly seeing that I was like expecting, like, this is just the way you do encounters with social events and everything. This is how you meet needs. And it was not working for her. And so she sent me a meme real quick about how extroverts are reaching into the bubble of introversion, trying to grab them and yank them into the outer world. And it was a funny meme, but it led me to realize I don't know anything about introvert or extrovert. And so I did a quick Google search, and within 3 clicks found your beautiful faces.
Oh.
And fell in love with you and binged all your content. And how that links into being a hospice nurse is I spent a lot of windshield time on the road, going from house to house. And so I had like 2-hour stretches where I had nothing to do. And so I would just listen to your podcast. And that's how I felt like I got to know y'all.
Yeah. So you would, on your way to going to hospice, you're processing what you've been experiencing, and here we're coming along for the ride. So
yes,
you were the period of your life.
Yeah, you were the second people in my car.
There you go.
Maybe that's the way you should think of it.
third microphone.
To the third person not in a microphone.
No, you were in my car.
Yeah.
Because I would pause and argue with you, and then unpause and be like, "Oh wait, okay, no, Antonia fixed it." Yeah, that makes sense.
That's funny.
Yeah, and then you joined our profiler training program, and we got to know you through that, and became friends. And now you're working with us in some of the guide and facilitator capacity.
Yes, we are friends,
which is great.
Yeah. We've got some ambient noise, I can tell.
Yeah. So if you're listening and you're not watching on YouTube, we decided to record again outside. It's nice weather these days, so we like to do recording outside. So you're gonna hear some wind because we came out. We had it all set up. We're doing this because you got to go back to Missouri today, Jonathan. And so we're going to record this morning, and we're outdoors and there is some wind. Yeah. So that's what you're hearing in the background.
So one of the reasons why I'm so eager to interview you, wind and all, is, we say this quickly. Yeah. And I've been a hospice nurse for 14 years. But when you told me that, the implications of what it means to be a hospice nurse for well over a decade, for almost a decade and a half, that struck me, and I'm like, that person has some very interesting stories.
Yeah.
And not just stories about what you've seen and experienced, but what you've had to go through as a person who's, helping people conclude this experience. So would you be willing to talk a little bit about what exactly does it mean to be a hospice nurse? What are your responsibilities?
Yeah. So this is not an educational piece, but I think it should be said, what is hospice?
Mhm.
So if hospice care is a service that meets the need of the dying and their loved ones. And currently, right now in our country, it's paid for by Medicare. So if you have Medicaid or Medicare, a lot of times that'll get paid for. And hospice is really just about the dying experience that you want to have as an individual, whether that be in your home or the nursing home that you call your home or the long-term care center, wherever you call home. That is where the hospice team comes together and meets your needs and your family's needs while you transcend from this life to the next life.
Yeah.
And have that dying experience.
So I always assume you have to be terminal. Like you've got to have something really wrong with you to have hospice. You got to have cancer, something really terrible, a terminal illness, and you're in a lot of pain. Like that's when I have the image of hospice in my mind. That's what I think of.
Yeah, I think of like pain management.
Yeah, but when you describe it, I'm like, I want to die that way.
Yes, yeah.
I want everybody to die that way. That sounds amazing to have like caretaking on the way out. Like,
yes, I've said many times before, if you were born into this world without help, then you may die without help. But most of us had some kind of help entering this world. We're going to need that same kind of care as we leave this world. Mm-hmm. And you're right, most of it is just because of the nature of death. It's usually a hard stop in our existence here, which usually includes cancer or dementia or Alzheimer's, any kind of like diagnosis. And that's true. Like Medicare will pay for it if there has to be certain criteria that's met, and for ethical reasons as well. And of course, that's always changing and up for, I don't know exactly what the up-to-date thing is, but mostly you have to have some kind of terminal illness in order for a doctor to sign off and pay for the care for someone showing up. But hospice in its spirit is something that was done a long time ago, long before there was Medicare dollars, in that there are some fundamental things that we need at the end of life, whether that be through old age, you're 102 and you're just concluding your life, or it's, something tragic like cancer.
Yeah.
What are those things? What are the things we all need at the end of life?
So I remember this one house we were in, and the man had a terminal diagnosis, and he had already passed through a couple stages and lost consciousness and was effectively dying. And I told the family, I said, I'm thinking probably, I want to say 48 to 24 hours. And there are markers you look for that help the family prepare. We're not talking weeks, we're talking days, we're talking hours. And then this was very early in my hospice career, and 48 hours passed and 72 hours, and he still hasn't passed on. And the family began to question, like, Jonathan, what's going on? And I began to look at him. I thought, what does he need? And of course, I have lots of resources that I can gather. And I thought, what, let's give him a bath. He hasn't had a bath in a couple of days. So I called in one of our aides, and she did this beautiful, like, ceremonial bath, just played some music in the background, anointed him with like lavender oil, put him in his favorite outfit. That was a big piece. Like, I asked the wife, like, what's the best thing he loved to wear? What's his favorite pajamas? We put that on him, and he died.
Wow.
And I remember that story because it led me to talk to all of my caregivers and remind them that the first memories of your life, you were born from your mother and immediately were placed in the hands of a nurse who cleansed you with water. It's one of our first somatic memories we have. And it makes sense that our life would be bookended by having that bath, that cleansing of the water before we pass. And so that is one of the needs, is cleanliness. And that might sound kind of like superficial, but being clean and dignified is a need that we have at the end of life. Another need you might think like, and this is a very hard need to let go of, but sustenance, food, water, it no longer becomes a need. And that's I believe it or not, I think I've seen families struggle more so with not feeding their loved one than the actual death experience, the pain of not being able to feed. And I think that's because I don't care what culture you come from. And I've seen so many houses, everyone spells love FOOD.
Mm.
I mean, that's how we express love. We feed our loved ones. And so to tell them like, oh, their body doesn't need this at the end of life. And actually it can be kind of dangerous because you put food in the body and it's not digesting properly. It can hurt.
Yeah.
So telling the loved one, you have to love them you have to love the dying in a different way, because food is not going to help at this time. So food doesn't become a need, but a lot of times I say replace food with touch.
Yeah.
Gently placing your hand on their hand and reminding them, I'm here with you.
Yeah.
I mean, it would make sense that the needs of someone would change the end of their life around like food, digestion, things of this nature.
Yeah, because it is a physical process. This is amazing too, because it can be so painful not to feed or give water to someone. I mean, you think about like any traumatic situation.
Yeah.
One of the first things we do is we, put a blanket over them and give them something warm to drink. It's an instinct we have. So when your loved one is going through a dying process, your instinct is to hydrate them. And I think this is such a merciful design in our bodies. And this is absolutely true. At the end of life, especially like with Alzheimer's, dementia, and at the end of life with anyone, all of your thirst receptors gently turn off. You no longer feel thirst.
Wow.
Since your body doesn't need it, there's no desire for it. You're transcending that desire that you would have with like hunger or thirst. So, and that I've watched people like instantly sob because they realize, oh, they're not suffering.
Yeah.
Like they're lying there, in the final stages of their life, but they're not thirsty. And so they start to reframe and understand, me meeting my father's need at this moment is not giving him his favorite beverage. It's got to be something else. So we can gently redirect the love into other things like touch, gentle touch, recreating the environment to be familiar and comfortable. And also too, a lot of like giving permission for the loved one to pass on.
Yeah, I bet people hang on longer because they don't want to leave their loved ones in the lurch. Like they feel like
responsible.
Yeah,
Oh,
they
yeah.
know that there's going to be grief and suffering coming
Yes.
for their loved ones, so they'll hang on to delay that.
I think in my mind, I see it as like these tethers that we're attached to. And like, if I'm dying, I'm attached to the biggest attachment, maybe my wife, and then my children, and then possibly my children's children. And so, I mean, when I first went into hospice, I thought death was some kind of chaos machine. Like I thought it was chaotic and it was unpredictable and even rude. And I have learned that death is incredibly polite. In that I have watched people get exactly what they want at the end of life. And traumatic deaths aside, when someone's dying in natural causes, even if it is a terminal illness, they're getting to decide. It's almost like, do they get to connect or reconnect or disconnect from the person? Do they have that permission? Then they die. Or they might wait. I mean, I have a couple of stories of like people in the dying process, but then I would ask the family, like, is there anyone else that hasn't said goodbye? There's been one situation. I remember this guy had he had an ex-wife that still lived in town. And they're like, well, he was with her for like 20 years. We had her come over and say her piece. Say, you have permission to go. And I can almost see that tether just gently release and allow him to transcend from this life. And even more funny stories, like I remember this guy, it was just him and his wife living out in the country. And she said goodbye. She said, you can go now, Harold or whatever his name was, like, you can leave. Like she was very directive, and he was not passing on. He was not dying. He was completely, in the unconscious stages, lying there, no food, no water, just a heartbeat. And I asked the wife, I was like, what would be annoying him right now if he was here? And she said, well, the grass is like 3 feet tall outside. I said, get the neighbor to cut the grass. The day that the grass was cut, he died.
Wow.
And I remember that was one of my first experiences, and it led me to believe we have these tethers that are attached to things we value.
Yeah.
precious things that are here on this planet. And if we are dying from natural causes, those have to be resolved.
Like responsibilities we haven't let go of.
Yes.
Like the grass was still his
yes, it
responsibility.
was. Yes, absolutely.
The theme that's coming up for me, the word complete or completion keeps coming up for me. Like
Yeah.
there's a desire or a sense of wanting something to feel complete.
Yeah.
And like closed out and finished well before you want to pass.
Absolutely.
It feels like that's the energy that's in that space.
Mm.
And it's unique as every person. I mean, if you're interested in book reading, there's a small pamphlet written by Barbara Carnes, registered nurse. And that was the first book that I read. And it's a very small book. I mean, it's like maybe 25 pages, but she reframes death as gone from my sight. That's the title of the book, Gone from My Sight. And it's not, she says it's not that they're dying. It's that they're just gone from your sight.
Mm.
They're moving beyond your ability to witness them.
Mhm.
And so our job as hospice nurses, as the hospice team, and even as the family in some regards, is to see them off well.
Yeah.
And that might be the spouse placing their hand on the dying's hand and saying, "It's okay. I'm going to be fine."
Mm.
Or it might be, "I forgive you." It might be setting up the physical environment to see someone off as if they're leaving on a long trip, or even taking care of something mundane as the grass getting cut.
Yeah.